Welcome back to The Explainer. All right, let's just dive right in because today we're looking at an absolutely fascinating 16th century psychological framework. It literally maps out the universal journey of love, heartbreak, and devotion. Like if you've ever felt those dizzying highs of a brand new crush or that crushing, sinking feeling of being let down, well, you're going to see yourself completely reflected in a text that was written hundreds of years ago.
To get through all of this, we're going to break our explainer down into 5 key phases. First, an intro to the Ostabostha. Then anticipation and restless waiting, betrayal, anger and regret, prolonged separation and agony, and finally, ultimate fulfillment and harmony. Let's get into it.
So, starting off with Section 1, Introduction to Ostabostha, the classical taxonomy of devotion. We're going to explore our foundational text here, the Ujjwalnilmani. It was written by Rup Goswami, who is a really prominent figure in the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, and it profoundly categorizes these deep, complex human emotions. What's truly fascinating about this concept is how the classical Nayika, or heroine, represents, well, way more than just romantic feelings. She embodies that deep, universal psychology of devotion and longing that every single one of us experiences, right? Now, in the Vaishnava tradition, these emotions are often mirrored in the divine love between Radha and Krishna, but make no mistake, the psychology we're talking about is entirely, universally human.
If we treat these 8 states as a continuous emotional timeline, we can actually watch the hero's journey unfold step by step. It kicks off from the very first minute of her courageous pursuit, navigates the rough weeks and months of conflict and agonizing waiting, and ultimately pushes through to years of enduring harmony. It is, quite literally, a complete emotional roadmap of a relationship.
Moving right along to Section 2, Anticipation and Restless Waiting, the Dizzying Heights. Let's look at how this journey builds into those incredibly relatable phases of anxious expectation. You know the feeling. This is where the emotional roller coaster really leaves the station.
We kick things off with the Absarika state. This represents that raw, visceral courage born from a deep passion that just completely overpowers any hesitation. I mean, she disregards social restrictions. She ignores danger, totally forgets her own safety, all just to get to her beloved. It's that I don't care what stands in my way kind of energy.
You can really feel that intensity when you look at the classical depictions. The heroine is out there navigating a dark, absolutely terrifying forest at night. There are literal snakes on the path, massive thunderclouds overhead, and yet her posture? Completely determined. She's driven entirely by love, just pushing right past every single fear.
Then, once she arrives, or when she's eagerly expecting her beloved to show up, she enters the second state, Vasakasaja. And the crucial takeaway here is that this is that exact, universal flutter of excitement we all get when getting ready for a highly anticipated date. It's that joyful, chaotic period of prepping your space, getting yourself ready, and, probably trying on 5 different outfits before ultimately just wearing the first one you put on.
The vibrancy of this phase is just incredible. She's planning every tiny little detail, decorating with flowers, fixing her ornaments, all while playing out the entire scenario in her head, imagining exactly what she's going to say and what she's going to do the second her beloved finally walks through that door.
But then, the delay happens, and the joy flips. The state of Utkantia perfectly mirrors that super modern anxiety of staring at your phone just agonizing over a delayed text message from someone you love. The excitement suddenly turns into extreme restlessness. She's pacing back and forth, she's staring down the path, she is actively listening for the tiniest sound of a footstep.
There's this incredibly poignant line from classical Vaishnava poetry portraying this state. My eyes remain fixed, watching the path. That perfectly captures how her mind just becomes entirely consumed by uncertainty. She even starts snapping at her friends out of sheer frustration. It brilliantly expresses the pure, almost physical pain of just waiting.
Which brings us to Section 3, Betrayal, Anger, and Regret, the deep valleys of conflict. Our explainer has to descend into the agonizing phases now, exploring exactly what happens when all of those high, dizzying expectations we just talked about are brutally shattered. And that brings us to the 4th state, Vipralabdha. Guys, this is the crushing, absolutely devastating realization that the promise has been broken, the beloved is just not coming. All that prior hope we saw, all that beautiful preparation, it just collapses entirely into pure frustration, deep sorrow, and this awful feeling of utter deceit.
You can tangibly feel the profound emotional weight and the heavy isolation that comes from being abandoned here. All that bright vibrancy of the preparation phase completely vanished. It's replaced by a deep, dark melancholy as she realizes she has been completely let down.
Now, what follows is incredibly complex, and it's so essential to understand the nuanced psychological difference between these next two states. First is Candida. This is the righteous, burning anger of being wronged, especially if she sees signs her beloved has been with someone else. But then there's Kalahantarita. That is the agonizing regret that hits right after she angrily rejects him. It's that awful, sinking pain of speaking way too harshly during an argument and realizing, oh no, I've pushed them away.
Visually, the contrast between these two emotional valleys is striking. On one hand, you have the fiery conflict of the heroine turning away a betraying lover, just filled with wounded pride. But on the other hand, you see the isolating, quiet mourning that immediately follows that prideful rejection. She's alone again, but this time, it's entirely by her own hand.
Let's move into Section 4, Prolonged Separation and Agony, the State of Viraha. We're transitioning to a much more somber phase of our analysis now, focusing on the sheer endurance required when there is immense physical and emotional distance between lovers.
This seventh state, Proshita Bhartrika, captures what Indian aesthetics calls viraha. Basically, it's the intense, incredibly heavy burden of prolonged separation. The beloved is far away, maybe in another land, and everyday life just simply loses its color. She completely loses interest in all the ornaments and pleasures she used to care so much about.
She effectively stands at the doorway of her life, completely stalled. She embodies that deeply relatable agony of a long-distance separation that has no definitive end in sight. Her entire existence becomes centered on nothing but memories and distant longing. But don't worry, the journey doesn't end in sorrow. Section 5, Ultimate Fulfillment and Harmony, the Triumphant Resolution. Emerging from all that heartbreak, we finally reach the triumphant state of emotional fulfillment.
We arrive at the eighth and final state, Swadhinabhatrika. This is it, the absolute peak of the relationship. All those anxieties of the past states, the waiting, the bitter betrayal, the painful distance, they are entirely replaced by total security, profound intimacy, and mutual affection.
Look at how complete harmony is depicted in this phase. She is completely at peace. Her partner is right there, demonstrating unwavering loyalty, attentiveness, and care. There's no more running through dark, snake-filled forests, right? There is only pure, mutual trust.
This culmination proves that the perilous journey we just walked through was actually building towards something profound. Overcoming that terrifying fear of the dark, surviving the crushed hopes of broken promises, healing from the stinging wounds of betrayal, all of those difficult states were absolutely necessary to forge this unbreakable, triumphant bond. So, I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. We just explored a 16th century framework, yet the anxiety of a delayed message, the sudden regret of an angry word, and the total bliss of real trust, they feel like they were written yesterday, don't they? It just goes to show how truly timeless and culturally transcendent the human heart really is. So, take a look at your own journey. Which of these 8 emotional states are you in right now?